Welcome to Encounter Grace. I'm Jason McKnight, and I'm glad you're here. Well, you've clicked on part 3 of our Leading with Increased Capacity series, and either that's because you really want to know the conclusion or the thing was on autoplay and it just kept going. Well, here you are anyway, and you're in for a real treat because my wife, Susan, in this segment teams up with Justin Tillman, and they bring home some very practical helps as we learn how to lead with increased capacity. They're going to talk about what it means to remain relational in situations and what it means to return to a sense of joy and to help others return to a sense of joy. So listen, and then I got to tell you, get ready to go out and try it. Enjoy.
I used to go, when I finished working, I was 28 years old. I had been working in Greenville, North Carolina, and I moved back to Charlotte to live there. That's where I'm from. And I went and looked at several different churches, and I landed on actually the church that I grew up in. And one of the biggest reasons was because the pastor who was there at that time was fantastic. And every Sunday I would go, great preaching. I learned so much. I walked away wanting to follow Jesus more wholeheartedly. So I was like, well, that's pretty good. You know, that's a great place, great reason to go to a church. So I went there, and it was great. Well, about 8 months in, the staff asked me to come on staff, and would you believe I got to do a lot of what I do here at Grace is in the mobilization area. Except there's one big difference. It was a really big church. So there was like 3,000 people come to that church. So that was really overwhelming. You know, trying to figure out how do we close the back door to keep people here instead of just coming right through to move to another church. Well, I really admired this pastor, and then I started working for him. And there were about 54 people on staff there. So it was a large staff team. And nice guy, but he didn't like people. The strangest thing for a pastor not to like people. He also didn't like conflict, and he ran from people and conflict. He said things at times that were pretty unkind about people if I happened to be close to him and hear him say these things. And even I could tell at my age, wow, that's really coming from a place of deep insecurity in him. It was really sad to see. Before I went on staff there and was just sitting there in the congregation, I looked at this guy as somebody who was spiritually mature. But as I got up close and personal, I was like, whew, he's missing some of these things that we're talking about today. He's missing the relational maturity for sure. He's missing the emotional maturity, definitely. It's pretty sad too. He ended up getting fired for plagiarizing. He ended up divorcing his wife. His family really fell apart. And he's not in a good place even to this day. And I can't help but wonder, these relational skills, these emotional, the maturity things that we're talking about here, that was so missing, not only in his ministry relationships, but also probably in his family relationship as well. So Justin said this already, but I'm going to say it a little differently because as we were planning this really hit me. You can't divorce spiritual maturity from emotional maturity or relational maturity. You just can't. And as we've already said, those 3 things, they are really inseparable. They go hand in hand. So you can't have one without the other. Again, Justin said it, you can't have leadership without people. If people aren't following you, then you're not leading. So that means leadership must be relational. It must be relational. For sure, as we just learned, leadership uses a lot of that left hemisphere brain that we didn't spend that much time on, but we alluded to. It's the problem solving, it's the managing strategy, it's the planning long term, it's the results, it's the vision and all that stuff. Of course, that's a big part of leading, but it's got to be combined with the right hemisphere stuff, the identity, the motivation, the emotional control, the relational skills, our joy, our care for others. Just like Jason said, both sides are really crucial. There are problems to solve all day long, we know that. But there's also relationships to cultivate and to steward. And if we're only using one side in our leading, we're really going to be stunted. Our leadership will be lacking. Because here's the deal, I really believe this. Problems can't be solved, vision can't be pursued and realized at the expense of people. It can't be pursued and realized. Problems can't be solved at the expense of the people in our midst. At least, let me say it like this, not in God's economy. Not in his economy. Not in a healthy, life-giving way. He doesn't want us to accomplish goals while we're running people into the ground. I don't think we're leading as he would if we're leading that way. That's why we started with the fruit of the Spirit, remembering what that is. That's why when we think of the greatest commandments, to love God and to love people. So, if leadership is so relational, as we've said, how do we lead in such a way that we maintain healthy relationships while we strive to reach a goal? Well, what we're going to talk about today really comes in this attachment center, the first level there that we just looked at, the attachment center, the bonding center. So let's remember, before we go any further, what Justin's already told us is what relational maturity is. Relational maturity is the ability to build and sustain joyful, empathetic, and secure relationships. So mature leaders find relational ways to solve problems. Mature leaders keep the relationship bigger than the problems. Keep the relationship bigger than the problems. You see why this is really good not only for work relationships, but also for marriage, right? It really is. Meaning, we have the capacity to remain relational in spite of pain or conflict. So a relationally mature person is often joy-oriented. They map out the world in terms of what's good in life. They excel at appreciation. They don't avoid problems, but they deal with them in a relational way. So that the goal is to solve problems in a way that makes the relationships stronger. Solving problems, but making relationships stronger. Now, in contrast, relationally immature leaders have almost no capacity to remain relational. They isolate, they blame, they get angry. They're often dominated by fear, and they map out the world around them just simply as problems to be solved. By default, what they end up doing is their brains look to whatever's scary or whatever's potentially bad, and that's what gets all their attention. And what happens is they turn off their relational circuits, and they're not able to deal with people relationally in the moment. They might not even be able to deal with people relationally for the long term. So what's an example of this? Well, imagine you have a conversation with a coworker or a friend, a spouse, a neighbor, where everything was going along just fine. And then someone said something that changed everything. He mentioned something you do that drives him crazy. Or she made one of those comments as if everyone knows something that you do that drives everyone crazy, and you did not know this. He pointed out how the team was really slacking off and doing a terrible job, and you were like, I thought they were doing a great job. Or she just made a pointed accusation about you right to your face. These things come at us, and how do we respond? Well, you might have been feeling relational, warm, happy to be with before these things, but once those things are said, doesn't something change? Can you feel it? Doesn't something change? A wall goes up. We get mad, we get sad, we might get ashamed or embarrassed. And in that moment, what's happening is our relational circuits are shutting down. They're shutting down. Now, we've talked about relational circuits a little bit, but here's what I'm talking about when I say this. When my relational circuits turn off, I lose access to that right side of my brain. So it's kind of like it's having a cramp, and I can't access it. And I become less relational. I lose my joy. I stopped acting like myself. And I can't think of a way to be kind at all in the moment. Has anybody ever lived this before? This happens to me quite a lot. So we're talking about relational circuits and them shutting down. So how do you know if your relational circuits are shutting down or if they're turned off completely? What are some signs of this to help you understand it a little bit more? Well, here's a few signs. First of all, I don't feel like being with someone I normally like being with. If Jason and I are getting in a fight, he's my favorite person to be with. I'm like, I'm out of here. I just don't want to be with him anymore. Or I want to fight this person. Or I want to flee. I just want to get out of here. Or I freeze and I don't know what I want to do because I'm just frozen. Or I think it's your fault when I hurt your feelings. Does that make any sense? Right? But I find myself doing that. Well, that's your fault. You took that the wrong way. It's your fault that I hurt your feelings. When others talk, rather than listening, I'm sitting there figuring out my comeback. I'm not at all listening to what they're saying. Or I don't want to make eye contact, so I just stop looking at the person. I'm just like, I'm ready to move on. Or my brain gets locked on something. It might be something you said that we need to talk about, and it's driving me crazy, and I can't get past it. Or I just become aggressive in how I interrogate, how I judge, how I try to fix people. Now, have any of you done any of these things? No. Thank you. This is what happens when our relational circuits shut down. When our switch turns off, our capacity to remain relational, that bottom level there, that attachment center to remain relational with others in the face of problems, it's disappeared. But y'all, if we want to excel as leaders, and if we want to just grow in our own relational maturity, whether we're thinking about it in leadership or not, we've got to recognize, one, when our relational circuits are off, or when we sense them turning off. And two, we got to learn and we've got to practice how to turn them back on. And then three, if we want to lead people well, we need to lead others to help them keep their relational circuits on as well. So tonight we're going to talk about two ways to turn our relational circuits back on. I'm going to talk about the first way, and then Justin will come up and finish up with the second way. So the first way is simply this, and we've used this phrase a lot as we've gone, but it's this. The first way is just to remain relational. Oh, that's easy, right? Yeah. The key difference between mature leaders and immature leaders, the key difference between mature and immature leaders is their ability to remain relational while dealing with problems. So when I'm relational, when I'm remaining relational, I'm curious, I'm appreciative, I'm kind, and I make good eye contact. Those are the four things we're going to talk about. These four simple things will help us remain relational. Now, I say simple because, they might seem simple, but I've been trying to work on these in our relationship and in any relationship I have, and they're not simple. They're kind of hard to do. But these are ways to train us to remain relational. The first one is curiosity. It's saying, I'm curious. We're training ourselves to stop, to take a step back in our minds in the heat of the moment, in the heat of whatever's going on that is making you go, my relational circuits are turning off right here. Something has happened. Train ourselves to stop, take a step back in our heads, in our minds, and ask a question or two about what's really going on here. How did we get from being happy together to her making me so mad I could scream? What's going on in her world that she's just lashed out at me like that? It's really simply this. It's a genuine interest in what someone thinks or feels. It's you taking a genuine interest in the moment in what that person you're dealing with, that group you're dealing with, is really thinking and really feeling. So yes, you're going to recognize, hold on now, there's this huge emotion that just, got triggered in me. And instead of allowing yourself to follow that and to go that way, remember we're talking about relational maturity here. Instead, you're able to press hold on that and stop and think, be curious about the person you're with and you're interacting with and who's bringing up all these different things. Wondering what might be going on in them, in their heart, that they came at you that strongly. It's a chance to understand the person in front of you more, to learn what makes them tick, to maybe find out why they feel so strongly about this. And here's the challenge, I think, is to use curiosity instead of defensiveness. Because I think that's a lot of times what I default to. Use curiosity. When you feel that defensiveness kick in, say, okay, wait a minute. I'm not going to be defensive. How can I be curious here? How can I be interested in what's going on inside of him or her? And what would it take for me to help connect them relationally? Genuine interest in what someone else thinks or feels is what we're talking about here. I don't know if this has happened to you before, but numerous times this has happened to me. Somebody has bugged me by what they've said or they've done, and I just reacted poorly. I mean, terribly, very much like an immature brat a lot of times. And then it comes out later that they were having a terrible day. They just found out awful news. And so they're not really coming at me and trying to be a jerk. They're just trying to process what's going on in their own life. Has that ever happened to you? And you feel about that tall when it happens? Well, let's remember that and be curious. What might be going on? And start to ask some questions to understand them a little bit more in the process. Curiosity is a clear sign that you're staying relational or you're seeking to stay in a relational mode. The next one is appreciation. How do we remain relational? Appreciation. Emotionally and relationally mature leaders will always be genuinely grateful. Will people say that about you? That Susan, she's a genuinely grateful person. Emotionally immature, relationally mature leaders excel at finding what's praiseworthy in every situation. Two of the most powerful forces in any relationship are appreciation and resentment, right? And what does appreciation do? It's like two magnets. It attracts. Whereas resentment, it repels, right? Sincere appreciation wakes up our relational circuits, not only in me, but in the person I'm dealing with. One time I had a fight with Andrew. I've had many, but I'm just going to talk about one time. He was a teenager, and I was in the midst of realizing through the love and respect stuff. They've got a great book for mothers and sons. I was learning that I needed to learn to speak the respect language with my boys. Girls, they love the love language, but boys need to hear respect spoken to them. And I was like, I don't know about this respect. It was like going over my head so much, but I was asking the Lord to help me learn to speak respect to him and tell him things I respected about him. Well, you're in the middle of a fight. How do you find something to respect when you're fighting with your child? And he's clearly in the wrong. I just had to throw that part in there just for fun. But I knew I had to, because I had been asking the Lord, and I was like, Lord, we're here in this fight. How do I do this? So I stopped and I took a breath and I just shot up the prayer of, Lord, I need your help here. And I said, wow, you're really good at this, Andrew. And he was like, like, what? And he said, at what? And I said, you're really good at laying out your reasons for why you feel so strongly and why you feel like your point is valid. I'm really, really impressed with how well you do that. And again, he was shocked. And he ended up saying, well, thank you. And I was like, well, Sure, finally I figured out something to respect you for. But what it did was it immediately popped the bubble of intensity in that interaction. And we were able to continue on. We still disagreed. I still had good points. He still had good points. But we were able to talk through those things, actually with goodwill, trying to understand one another more than we had before. So it's a funny thing, but feeling appreciated is one of the most important needs that people have. Imagine that. That's something easy we can do, y'all. We can learn to find things that we appreciate or that we respect, even in the middle of an intense conversation, because when they feel appreciated, they feel like they belong and they're valued by us, by the group. So appreciation is a way of turning your relational circuits back on. And if we can learn to train our brain in the heat of the moment to stop and remember, okay, what's one thing I appreciate about this person? And boy, it might feel fake, but sometimes you got to fake it till you make it, right? That's just the bottom line. But I think if we can do that, you're going to move back to seeing this person differently, not just as the enemy. And you might still be frustrated with them, but you're going to be more open to them and willing and able to give them grace. I had a friend say to me recently, she said, do we have to thank someone when they're just doing their job? So I've been mulling that over for a few weeks. I'm like, wow. And I think, I'm coming back to her with a resounding, yeah, we do. Is this jiggling on my earring? Yeah, sorry. Because, why? Turns our relational circuits back on. When the boys are asked so nicely to do the dinner dishes after dinner, and they don't want to, but that's their job for the night, and they do it. For me to say thank you to them afterwards, it's just kind, but it opens up the relationship back again if they're kind of huffy about it. And I just say, thanks for doing that. That really meant a lot. Something happens, right? It's those relational circuits turning back on. All right, so we've got curiosity, we've got appreciation. Thirdly, we've got kindness. Kindness. See if you can get my earring off.
No, I think we just tried that.
Thank you. Oh, nah. It was feeling a little tense there. Thanks, Kent.
Is that okay?
Yeah. All right, kindness. That was really kind too, Kent. Thank you, sweetie. Kindness can be defined as shared joy. It's doing things that create joy for someone else. And in the process, your joy grows as well. When my relational circuits are shut down, being kind is the last thing on my mind. When I was 18 years old, y'all, I worked at South Park Mall in Charlotte in Belk department store as a cosmetic and floater contingent. Now, I know you don't probably know what that means, but I was a floater. Anywhere they needed somebody in those areas, I got to fill in. So it was a really important job. It's prepared me for everything in life after. But it was fun, and it was kind of a pain, too, because I didn't know the areas. You know, I'd go to Clinique one day, and then I'd go to Giorgio Armani the next, and so when customers would come in, I'd kind of get flustered and feel dumb a lot. Well, one day, I was in the Clinique counter. I was there by myself, and I thought it was really cool, because Clinique makeup, 18-year-old, this is awesome. And this lady came in, a customer, and started barking out all the different makeup items that she needed. So, y'all, I'm running around the whole counter like this, going crazy, opening up every drawer 10 different times, because all the stuff she needs, I can't find it. And she was mean as a snake. She made me feel like a fool. She would get mad at me because I couldn't do it fast enough, all these different things. And I went back and forth from feeling like I wanted to punch her to I wanted to just run away and cry because of how she was making me feel. So I finally got all her stuff. I'm at the cash register ringing it up, and I'm so mad. I'm like, okay, ringing it up. As I'm ringing it up, because it was a lot of stuff, so it took a while, I have this voice going through my head over and over and over. So you got to kill them with kindness. You just got to kill them with kindness. Well, when I started my job in the retail industry, that's what my dad always said to me. He's like, retail is hard work, but you got to kill them with kindness. And I would always be like, that's great, Dad, okay. Well, here I was being faced with a woman who was mean as a snake, and there's my dad's voice, kill him with kindness. And I wanted to kill her, but not with kindness. So as the voice kept coming, I was kind of like, all right, challenge accepted. I'm going to show you it doesn't work. So I moved from ringing her up to putting all her stuff in the bag. And I remember shaking. I was so flustered. And I just thought, how can I be kind to this lady? So the only thing I could think of was, well, I'm going to ask her how her day is. So I said, so how was your day? And it was amazing. She said, you know what? It's been an awful day. And she started telling me about her day. I'm 18 years old. She's probably 40, 45, I don't know. She started telling me about what an awful day. All these different things had happened to her. And she ended up saying, I am so sorry I took everything out on you. And it was like, I wanted to go, come here, honey, let's just hug. The relational circuits that had been shut down to the max opened up simply because my dad's voice in my head, kill him with kindness, but it pushed me out of my comfort zone to try to be kind and inquire how she was. And then she just opened up. And we were like BFFs by the end of the conversation. But it was that is one of those times in my life where I was like, well, my dad was right. But I saw a visible change in somebody just by a simple trying to be kind. So joy is always relational. And the more it's shared, the more that kindness is shared, the more it amplifies and multiplies and grows other good emotions in the people around us. So we've got curiosity, appreciation, kindness, and then the last one, Jason's already talked about a little bit, eye contact. Make eye contact. Avoiding eye contact is a common sign that our relational circuits are off, but maintaining eye contact is a good way to keep those relational circuits engaged. It's an outward physical way to simply show somebody we're paying attention. And I think we all have a different level of what we like in general conversations with eye contact. But in a situation where there's relational tension, if I can train myself to keep good eye contact in a helpful way during that tension, that's going to help me keep my relational circuits on. And it might help them keep their relational circuits on as well. Because as we've already said, the eyes are the windows to the soul. So we get to be curious, be appreciative, be kind, keep good eye contact. You can work on these straight in order. We were talking about it the other day, and Justin said, well, I just start with the C. It spells cake, by the way, if you want to remember it easily, C-A-K-E. But he said, I just start with curiosity, and I power through like that. I think you could also jump in at kindness if you want, and just jump however it is. Just dive in. You know what happens? If we can remain relational while solving problems, that builds trust in the people that we lead. And that's one of the most important skills and habits that needs to start showing up automatically, really, if we want to become the kind of leader that people love to follow. So we've got do we have time to do the... Okay, we're not, sorry, you were going to get to practice, but you're not going to because I went too long probably. But remain relational, that's the first one we're going to work on tonight. Now Justin's going to come and share the next step for us. Justin.
Yeah, which is return to joy. I told you to hear that phrase again tonight. Remaining relational. And to think about the elevator we talked about earlier, that's kind of the first floor, that attachment. Am I relating to you? How do I keep that relational switch turned on? So when we talk about returning to joy, thankfully for the most part, we live our lives in a state of general peace and joy for the most part. but life isn't perfect and things don't stay that way. And so we encounter those big 6 negative emotions. So what do? Well, this returning to joy, that's the bouncing back from whatever that emotion is. How do we bounce back from whatever it is we're feeling? A couple things that I thought were interesting. Just 6 minutes. Just spending 6 minutes in one of those negative emotions leaves the stress hormone cortisol in your bloodstream for 24 hours. Wow. If you spend 6 minutes in a negative emotion, that hormone is in your bloodstream for the next 24 hours. So how can we get past as quickly as possible? Sometimes it's longer than 6 minutes, but that's just to give you an idea of how long these emotions can impact you. They can stay in your system for a while. If we get stuck in that negative emotion and we can't bounce back, if we stay in it long enough, our personality begins to shape around that emotion. So I become known as the angry person. I become known as the depressed person. I become known as the shameful person, the person who's always ashamed. And so we avoid the emotions we're afraid of, and we have a hard time staying connected when we're in these emotions. So how do we get out of them? We've talked about how to keep the relational switch turned on so that we can at least get past that first floor. So the things I'm going to talk about now are how do we do second and third floor? How do we get through assessment and then attunement? How do I get past the guard shack, and how do I stay feeling like I'm connected and that somebody gets me? So there are 3 steps to doing this that we're going to talk about tonight. And it's VCR, and it does not stand for video cassette recorder. Some of you don't have a clue what that is, but VCR. And so the first step in VCR is to remain relational is to validate. I think I'm going backwards. I'm sorry. I'm going to get there. Down is forward. That's all I have to remember. Down is forward. All right, here we go. Validate. So what do I mean by validate? What I do not mean by validate is agreeing or approving of the emotion. So I can do this with myself, or I can do this with another person. I want to validate the emotion that I'm feeling or that they're feeling. Again, it does not mean I agree with the feeling or emotion. It does not mean that I agree that it's the right one in the right moment. All I'm doing is I'm acknowledging that you're angry or that I'm angry. Like Jason said, that second floor, it's good, it's bad, it's scary. I can get past that second floor if I can at least recognize that I'm angry, that I'm scared, that I'm upset. So validating, that's what that's doing. I am feeling angry right now. Or I can tell you're really upset about what it is we're talking about. It doesn't mean, again, that a good example, John William loves bananas. He's gotten better, but when that banana would break, he would lose his mind. I'm like, dude, you're going to chew it up anyway. Like, what does it matter? But if that banana broke, he would fly into a rage. And so I'd have to sit down with him and I'd be like, I see you're upset. I see you're upset, but rage is not the right emotion right now. We save rage for big things. We can be upset that the banana's broken, but what I'm trying to do is validate the emotion he's feeling. So he can know my dad sees me. My dad gets it. Because if I don't get the validation part right, I may correct the wrong problem. Or I may belittle him and just start with, dude, you're acting ridiculous. Dude, you're acting like a baby, which for him at 4 is a huge deal. He does not want to be a baby. So if I come out with, dude, you're acting like such a baby right now, it tears him down. And that's not what I want to do. It gets my point across, but probably not in the most helpful way. So I want to validate what he's feeling. I see you. I see you're upset. I see you're really mad. I see you're really scared. I see you're ashamed right now. Whatever the emotion is, I'm trying to see it. And that kind of goes back with that curious piece. I'm trying to validate what emotion you're feeling. And it also means actively listening in an effort to recognize the intensity level of that emotion. Because there are different levels of anger. There's annoyance, there's rage. Both derivatives of anger, but different intensity levels, different temperatures on that thermometer of anger. So I want to recognize what the emotion actually is that I'm feeling or that the other person is feeling. And I want to gauge how intense is that emotion. And this takes practice. That's what I'm saying. Practice these things. And Jason made a great point. I guarantee you'll start seeing things a little bit differently after tonight. You'll start thinking about, you might not be able to know, well, what do I do here or there, but you'll at least start thinking, oh, I'm seeing that emotion. Oh, I'm feeling something inside right now. That's great. That's how you're learning. That's part of learning. And then this is a skill you will practice the rest of your life. So I really want to encourage you to start trying it even tonight. If you have a heated conversation on the way home, or if you get up in the morning and you have a feeling of anxiety about the day, start to validate, what am I feeling? How intense is it? Again, anger versus rage, sadness, or is this deep depression? Am I just slightly embarrassed, or am I ashamed of what's happened? Because again, if we don't validate or recognize the emotion that we or others are feeling, the two risks that we run is we either belittle them by making it not that big of a deal. Because think about this, if you've ever been really upset, one of the worst things that somebody can say to you is, you're totally overreacting right now. I might be, but this is not the time to tell me. I might be overreacting, but if you come out of the gate with that, we're not going anywhere. We're not going anywhere. So you either belittle them and patronize them, or you make them feel unseen. If you just respond with, I just don't understand why you're acting this way. Well, then you don't see me. I don't feel like you see me. You don't get me. So we're not going to go anywhere in this conversation because you don't even recognize how I feel. So why am I going to listen to anything else you have to say after that point? So I'm trying to validate, what are you feeling? What am I feeling? And again, the intensity level. I'm not making a judgment call on it yet. I'm just trying to recognize what is there. So that's validate. So once we've kind of validated, and again, this is not just with other people. You can do this with yourself. Because emotional capacity is not just relating to other people, it's also how can I handle the emotions that come up in me. And I'm a very emotional person, and so I'm trying to use this a lot because I've seen in my life, I have a tendency to let my emotions get the best of me quite often. So I am using these same things now, trying to get better at how do I relate to other people and how do I get to such a point where I don't completely shut down because I'm so overwhelmed with whatever's going on. So don't just think this is a project for you to work on with somebody else. This is also something that you can do on your own. And the more you learn to do these 3 steps with yourself, the better you will get at modeling it for other people, because this is not just a skill that you read about in a textbook and you go, oh, I got it. You have to actually start doing it or it's not going to do anything. So validate is, what is the emotion and how intense is it? Then you want to comfort. And that's why we got to get the validate part right. Because if I don't know what emotion you're feeling and I don't know what level of intensity it is, or even for myself, then the next step I might get wrong. I might say the wrong thing that I intend to comfort you, but if I haven't recognized how angry you are, it might be like pouring a thimble on a burning house. It's not going to do anything. So I've got to match my comfort level to what it is you're feeling and how intense it's feeling. And comfort just simply involves providing emotional support and reassurance just to soothe whatever the emotion is, whether it's anger or distress or any one of those 6. And comfort doesn't mean you're trying to provide a sense of safety. A sense of safety. The fancy term is psychological safety. It's not safe space or anything like that, but it's just this person feels seen, they feel heard. And if they do, they're much more likely to listen to what you have to say next. And so when you comfort them, that's what you're trying to do. You're not trying to baby them and say, oh, sugar, it's okay, just calm down. That's not what you're trying to do. You're recognizing the emotion. And now that I know how angry you are, how can I best help you walk down it? And so if you feel like, oh, well, Justin understands that I'm really upset right now, maybe he can help me calm down a little bit. But if Justin doesn't understand what I say right now, I'm just going to get angry at him next. And so validate and then comfort. You're offering empathy. If you're close enough to the person that's appropriate, it might be a hug. It might be just a hand on the shoulder, just something to show, hey, I see you, I see you're upset, and I am here with you. You're not stuck in this, because that's what scares us, is we're afraid we're going to get stuck in that emotion and we're not going to get out of it. And so having someone else there with me who gets me and is able to comfort me, at least I don't feel alone. And you might not be able to help me, but I'm no longer stuck in this jungle of anxiety by myself. There's somebody else in here with me trying to help me work my way out of it. And just verbal reassurance, something like, hey, I'm here with you. You're not alone. Let's talk through this. Let's figure this out. It becomes a joint exercise and not just me by myself. And like Jason said earlier, this is also between you and God. Because God sees that you're angry. God sees that you're upset. And he knows how upset you are. And so attuning to him, God, help me. How can I work my way down? I'm so angry right now, God, and I just can't seem to, I'm not in a spot where I'm ready to talk to that person or ready to deal with this. So let me deal with you first. Can you help me? Because we do our best to give words of comfort, but who's going to give you the best words of comfort? It's going to be God. It's going to be through his word. It's going to be through the Holy Spirit. Because he knows, I'm reminded of that verse in Romans, the Holy Spirit speaks with groans and utterances that words can't express. And so validate and recognize emotion and then try to comfort. And even in yourself, again, you might tell someone, I'm here for you, you're not alone, but even in yourself, Lord, help me calm down. There are ways to do that. You think of the Psalms, when I am afraid, oh Lord, I will trust in you. Just things like that to remind yourself that, okay, anxiety does not last forever. Sadness does not last forever. These things will come to an end. Because when we're stuck in them, they feel like it's never going to end. I'm going to be stuck here forever. That's not true. So reminding yourself, this will end. The Lord is with me. And then when you're talking to that other person, you're not alone. I'm going to walk through this with you. We're going to figure this out. Even though we may be upset at each other, we're going to commit to figuring this thing out together. And so then the next thing, once you've done that, once you've validated the emotion, which again is not agreeing with it necessarily, but just recognizing it and its intensity level, and you've begun to comfort yourself or the other person, the next thing is repattern. And what this means is work on building new patterns to deal with that emotion. New helpful patterns to deal with that emotion. What we want to do is we want to replace unhealthy ways of dealing with emotions with healthy ways of dealing with emotions. So repatterning, you probably can identify in yourself some unhelpful, not very constructive ways of dealing with some of your negative emotions. Because if you've ever had an argument that blew up, go back and revisit it and evaluate it, and I guarantee you there's an unhelpful pattern there that probably caused that argument to spill over. So what are some new ways that we can learn to bounce back from these negative emotions? Real quick, I'm going to walk through the 6 real fast and give you just a real quick thing to put in your tool belt for, okay, well, what's a repattern for this? What's a repattern for that? Really quickly. So let's look at anger. Just taking a pause, something that simple. If you're angry and upset, just taking a pause, taking a time out, giving yourself time. What's that? Yeah, count to 10. What's the Daniel Tiger song? When you feel so mad you want to roar, just take a deep breath and count to 4. So thankfully John William can count to 4. But so just taking a time out, pausing, letting the anger settle a little bit. What about anxiety and fear? You can use things like deep breathing. Again, that sounds so simple, but it helps. And it helps because it's the way God has designed your body. Take a deep breath right now. Just fill your lungs up as much as you can. Hold it for about 2 seconds and then slowly let it out. How does that feel? Does it start to feel a little bit calmer? Your heart rate naturally slows down when your lungs expand to a certain level. That's just the way God designed your body to work. There's nothing magical about it. It's just what happens. So taking a deep breath can start to calm your nervous system a little bit and help take the edge off of that fear or anxiety that you're feeling. That's a repattern, learning to take a breath. Sadness, when you feel sad, intentionally recall a joyful memory. Your brain oftentimes can't tell the difference between an imagined thing and what's actually happening in front of you. Because think about it. When you think about somebody you love, what does your face do? You smile. They're not standing in front of you. Why are you smiling? Because your body is responding to the memory that you've recalled. So if you're feeling sad, recall a joyful memory. It doesn't make the sad situation go away, but it helps break up the sadness. So recall a joyful memory and watch what your body does in relation to that. What about shame? Well, in shame, put yourself in the position of a friend. If your friend was feeling the shame that you're feeling right now, what would you say to them? Say it to yourself. So if my friend is ashamed, I might say to them, hey, we all mess up sometimes. You're going to get through this. You're going to learn. Say the same thing to yourself because you're your best friend. So say the same thing to yourself when you're feeling that shame. Give yourself some positive self-talk. It sounds hokey, but the things you say in your mind matter. So talk yourself up. If you're feeling disgust, work on reframing that source of disgust and find elements of understanding or appreciation in that situation. This is a really uncomfortable situation, but what can I find in it that is maybe good? What's a good thing that I can find here? And then despair. Start maybe developing a daily gratitude journal, something just to keep your mind focused on good things. Again, despair is that sense of nothing's going to change. I have no hope. Well, remind yourself of the good things you have in your life because God has been good to you. And this situation that you're in, you won't be stuck in forever. God has been good to you, so remind yourself. I think this is interesting. Throughout the Old Testament, especially as you watch the Israelites come out of Egypt and into the Promised Land, what do they do after every major event? They build an altar. They build something to remind them of what God has done. A gratitude journal can be that for you, just reminding yourself of what God has done. I think Jason mentioned this one time. How many times in the New Testament we're called to remember? We're called to remember. And so just having a journal that you can flip through when you feel like life is horrible and nothing's ever going right, go back and go, oh, well, it doesn't always go bad. Look what God did here. Look what God did here. He's been faithful here. He'll be faithful again. I thought I was going to get stuck in that emotion there and he got me out of it. He's going to do the same thing here. So when you get in that sense of despair, go back to that journal you've written down and look at the altars that you've put up along the way of what God has done for you in the past and remind yourself of who God is. So those are some really simple ways of how to kind of bounce back from those 6. Again, it takes practice. An important thing, validate does also, for guys like me, validate doesn't mean fix either. Validate just means recognize what the emotion is. We're not trying to fix it necessarily. That kind of comes, I hate to use the word fix, but when the comfort and repattern, that's sort of where that falls in. But with validate, we're just trying to figure out what is. So validating, again, it takes practice. And for some people, it comes naturally. For some of us, it's going to be harder, but it's a skill you can learn. It is a skill you can learn. So again, simple example, quick 3-step process that I encourage you even tonight to start practicing with, even with just yourself. You don't have to start necessarily trying to read everybody. Just start reading yourself. Can you recognize your own emotions? You'll probably be surprised how often you're feeling things and you didn't even realize you were feeling it. And kind of like Jason was talking about with the elevator, so many times we kick over early and don't even think about it because it's happening faster than conscious thought. And like Jason said with breathing, we can think about our breathing and change it. We can do the same thing with our thought patterns. And this is a muscle just like any other muscle. The first time you go to the gym and lift that weight or you go run that mile, it's hard. It's very hard. But the more you do it, you build muscle memory. And this is the same thing in your head. Your brain works a lot of the same way. The more you practice these things, the better you will get at it. And again, some people are just naturally better at reading people than others, but you can get better at recognizing what people are feeling and then responding appropriately, with the ultimate goal being staying in relationship, even through difficult things. Again, it doesn't mean you won't still get angry, but how can we stay in relationship? Because that's what God wants. God wants us to remain relational as we work through the things that are going on in our lives. The enemy wants us to break relationship and break up teams or break up whatever it is. He doesn't want us to thrive together. Knowing you're going to have emotions, you can't change the fact that you're going to get angry, you're going to get upset. How can you work your way through them? And some of the things we should, again, there are a lot of other skills that you can learn, but these are 2 that we thought were really helpful, pretty easy to implement. Turning your relational circuits back on, and then how do I get back to joy? How do I get back to that baseline from a negative emotion? So I hope that's helpful for you. VCR, validate, comfort, repattern.